Welcome to CosmoFactory, a podcast by Cosmoprof Worldwide Bologna, where we explore the entire cosmetics, personal care, and fragrance industry supply chain. I'm your host, Deanna Utrusky, and here at CosmoFactory, we look beyond the trends to discover the ideas, initiatives, and innovations that are truly advancing beauty. Let's get started. This episode is about the ethical sourcing of botanical ingredients. It's about plant science, cellular extraction technology, and harvesting rainwater. And it's about ingredient solutions for cosmetics, personal care, wellness, and nutraceutical applications. Today, here on the CosmoFactory podcast, I am joined by Lisa Carroll, CEO of Native Extracts. Lisa, welcome to CosmoFactory.
Hi, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. I'm pleased to be speaking with you. I'm glad you are here. Now, Native Extracts, the company you lead, is based in Australia, which, as we all know, is a single country continent. And as I've suggested in the intro to this episode, you specialize in natural and botanical cosmetic ingredients. So I'd love for you to start us off by talking about what regions or geographies of the Australian continent you are sourcing botanical materials from.
Yes, it's a mega diversity of untapped biological resources or botanical resources. And we source our ingredients from all over this massive country. From east to west coast, from north to south, Tasmania, of course, as well. We even have brands wanting just very specific regional botanicals, which is interesting too. For example, we've got brands that just focus on species that we source from Tasmania, whether they're Australian natives or even non-natives like our Tasmanian lavender. But it's such a diverse, mega diversity here in Australia. And what's really interesting is that until we started over a decade ago, there wasn't any commercial full plant profiles on Australian natives, which I found really interesting given that on this massive continent, we've got the oldest living culture that's been sustained by these botanicals, and there was really no data on it. So for us, that was a huge exciting discovery journey, and something that we wanted to share with everyone. We didn't want to lock this knowledge up. We wanted to make sure that we could really expand on the science, understanding the plant profiles, and then sharing it for others to further innovate.
Yeah, and you've suggested there that a lot of the species you work with are native, but it sounds like some may have been introduced as well. Can you comment on is your approach a mix to wild harvesting and cultivated plants, or?
Certainly in the beginning, I think that's a really good question because certainly in the beginning when we started, there was very little established what I would call crop status of a lot of the Australian natives because there really was only the food industry at the time that was sort of jumping in from time to time from a bush food perspective. I really feel that that bush food kind of terminology really limits the value of our botanical species and just I guess really pointed to taste and color and all that sort of thing where we were really missing what the ontology or the plant profiles were and what those species had to offer. So from Australia's perspective, we have a massive library of Australian botanicals that are native and that aren't grown anywhere else in the world. So initially we would start with wild harvesting, but very quickly realized that to grow our business and to assure, a sustainable or reliable supply chain of botanicals to service the extract industry and our customers, that we really had to look beyond wild harvesting into commercial crop status. So
Mhm.
working with some of our growers, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, that were moving into that space. I think a really big thing for us is to avoid wild harvesting because we want to make sure that we're not impacting the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, and also looking at the practices of cropping versus wild harvesting, introducing really exciting things like water-wise concepts like, agri-tech innovations in aquaponics, in desert areas, and that sort of thing.
Mhm,
So,
mhm.
yeah, I think today wild harvesting is something that we would avoid as much as possible.
Interesting. Thank you. And I have sort of maybe most of the library of episodes in my head, and something you said a moment ago reminded me of an episode I did not long ago, just this past October, when I spoke with Linda Dampa about her approach to ingredient sourcing in Côte d'Ivoire. One of the things she talked about was the value that she places on, and I'm paraphrasing her remarks here, but hundreds of years of wisdom that's behind regional skincare ingredients. And Lisa, you and I had a conversation the other day, and you spoke about ancient wisdom that I think you're borrowing as well from some of your sourcing partners. I'm wondering if you can comment on how Indigenous people's knowledge relates to the contemporary beauty ingredients business.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's something as far as native extracts is concerned, we're all about the science. We're all about going into the cell of unique botanicals as well as traditional botanicals. We've got over 400 ingredients. Some of those non-natives are grown in Australia as well. When we're talking about ancient wisdom, it's I really acknowledge and respect the wisdom that our First Nation people have here in Australia as far as the botanicals go. It's something that is, very much their cultural IP, their historical use IP. That's not something that we want to leverage or get involved in. But what we can do is provide the commercial ingredients with the ontology, the plant profiles, and the science to allow them to have access to this new knowledge and relate it to their cultural IP and their historical use IP to support what their ancient wisdom is. I don't think that it's something outside of First Nation people that we should be leveraging. That's their space.
Mhm,
But
mhm.
we certainly really love working with growers and really enjoy connecting growers to more knowledge, particularly in a commercial space, that allow them to then go beyond their crops and explore new markets, whether it's the beauty industry, for topical applications, whether it's pharmaceutical, developing, pharmaceutical applications based on historical knowledge or the nutraceutical space. So we see ourselves as, ethical partners that can work with growers to, expand where they want to go with their knowledge and their crops.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. And you mentioned there that you work with some 400 plant extracts, and I know that your team uses an ingredient extraction process that requires water. I'm hoping you'll talk with us about how that water is sourced.
Yeah, when I created this company, started thinking about it back in 2012, it was really in response to demand where we were asked to create, did we have access to extracts that delivered a plant profile? And that was a really exciting moment for me because when you get the opportunity to create a company, you get to create it the way you'd like it to be. And it's always been in our philosophy from day one that we wanted to create an eco-responsible approach to ingredient solutions. And so looking at our footprint, at the size of our factory, the energy that we use, we have solar panels, but most importantly, because we do a lot of water and glycerin or ethanolic and water extractions with our cellular extraction process, we wanted to look at how we use the water and looking at, there's a lot of talk about water today. Water-wise, formulations is really, really important. We're seeing a lot of waterless formulations as well as a result. It's not a surprise to most of us globally that we are facing a water scarcity issue across the world. It's probably harder for Australia to see it because we're surrounded by water and we have such abundance of it. So for us, with our extraction process, the water we use is rain harvested. And surprisingly, when we test it against the public supply, it's actually cleaner. and less, um, it's has a less of an impact on our filtration system as well as a result. So that's just one of the aspects that we have in our eco-responsible manufacturing charter.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your sharing that. And as you suggested, there's so much going on with water. I've certainly been presenting on it, writing on it, paying attention to it carefully. And this idea of harvesting rainwater, I can't imagine it's perfectly unique to your company, but it doesn't come up very often. So I'm curious if you have any notes about when it might make sense for a company to consider harvesting rainwater. Who does this, who's this a fit for?
Yeah, look, there are other companies that I know of in Australia, contract manufacturers that are rain harvesting. Look, from a business perspective, it makes a lot of sense as well as an ethical perspective. We go through tons of water a week, tons and tons of water. And we are fortunate to be in a subtropical region where there is so much water and rainfall. So for companies that want to look at being more resource responsible, it will come down to do they have the space, in their facility to actually manage this sort of level of harvesting? Um, does a company, operate in a high rainfall area? These are, important considerations. Can't just put a tank out and cross your fingers. We want a reliable source of it. So to date, we haven't had to switch over to the public supply yet, which is great. And we have an abundance of water, as everyone's probably heard about the floods that we've had in our region in Australia over a couple of years ago. So yeah, really, really working with the resources that you have in the region that you're operating as a business, I think makes a lot of sense
Yeah.
for any business. All of us have a part to play in, looking at our resource responsible strategies, and collectively we can then make a change, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't want to get into, too much of the nuance of every extraction technology going on in the industry. You've mentioned that yours is called cellular extraction. I'm hoping just briefly you can explain that extraction platform to us. And I'm wondering, do you use the same process for every plant that you work with? Is cellular extraction the same regardless of the botanical material you start with?
Yeah, the birth of cellular extraction, we actually even created we had to create a name for it so that people could understand because everyone was like, what is it? What is it? And it's really exciting, a decade on now to see that it's actually been accepted as in an industry, extraction process and well respected for it. For us, we were having a look at the time at what macerated and percolated extracts were doing, what the plant profiles were. We really just wanted to create an honest, true to nature extract or ingredient. Whatever was in the cell of a plant that was water soluble, we wanted to encapsulate that or harness that and deliver that in a liquid medium that was the extract that others then could further innovate from. Um, where I went was actually looking at how a plant moves its phytocompounds around using natural gradients and osmolarity. And really that's the principle behind cellular extraction. We knew we had to get in and get out fast to maintain the integrity of the natural molecules, but we had to do it gently. So we use high pressure, we use static states, and we actually manipulate and create that concept of, osmolarity. And that allows us to bring everything over that's water soluble. We're looking at, plant profiles and ontology where we can characterize, hundreds of metabolites in a commercial extract. And really pulling everything out of the cell and exhausting biomass in a process where we actually can use less biomass than past processes like maceration and percolation and get a really wide plant profile.
I've mentioned this, I'm sure, on past episodes, but there definitely is a movement in the industry towards what we might think of as more holistic ingredients, right? And away from single fractions. And the way you're describing it, you know, suggests that there's not only more almost nutrition or skincare benefits that can be derived from using all of the materials available. But there's also sort of an economy to it as well. It's interesting.
Yeah, we definitely looked at eco-conscious manufacturing, and I guess, when you're looking at just the source of biomass, for example, and being able to use less biomass allows us to work with plants that might be at that early stage of getting to global crop status and that sort of thing as well. And it allows us to go and share it with the market or specific customers where they might have first access for a couple of years while the growers are expanding. But when you look at our process, we actually go into the cell, we flood the cell under high pressure, and then we transfer across the cell membrane, the semi-permeable membrane, and suspend it in that liquid medium, that extractant medium, whether it's ethanolic, whether it's a glycetrac. And what that's really been able to show us is where we think and where we know that the explosion this next decade in plant science global research is going to be on the entourage. We've been talking about it for a long time. The cannabis space has really escalated the understanding and benefits of working with an entourage where, moving away from isolating and purifying a single ingredient and delivering what we call a true to nature ingredient. So I guess there's sort of a couple of different ways to look at it. From a science perspective, the evolution of a botanical over millions of years through natural selection, nature's been very clever at choosing the phytocompounds it needs to sustain its survival that support and work together in their synergistic relationships. We want to harness that and deliver that. It's not nature never isolated or purified a single compound. And what we can see is that while we might have some major peaks, of say rosmarinic acid in our native river mint extracts, and there might be minor metabolites. That's not to say that those metabolites don't have a part to play in the plant profile. They can have a very powerful part to play in supporting and buffering some of those other metabolites. And this is research that really is, I think, at a very early and very exciting stage. We saw it with how we harness natural vitamin C, for example, in our Kakadu Plum extract, being able to hold this biological ascorbic acid. And as we know, ascorbic acid is highly unstable. We have a love-hate relationship with it. Um, its instability is also something that's really important for us as far as its efficacy as an antioxidant, for example. But how do we work with this ingredient that is so highly unstable, and how is it stable in the fruit, for example? So when we deliver the biological ascorbic acid within its entourage, we're actually able to hold it for a lot longer than if we had just the actual molecule itself.
Mhm.
So yeah, that synergism with the full entourage or the full plant profile then also allows I guess, the economy of a botanical to be um, relatable to so many different applications. So now we're looking at a botanical extract as nature's formulation. This plant profile has, massive sources of polyphenols, which is so important for longevity from a topical as well as an ingestible perspective. But we can look at what particular compounds of interest in the plant profile might relate to hair care or barrier function, and so on.
Mhm. No, and I'm glad you've mentioned product applications there, and also you mentioned the word ingestible. I know some of your ingredients do have a history of human ingestion, but so often when we talk about ingredient topics here on Cosmo Factory, our minds go to skincare, body care, hair care, these topical products that we're also well versed in. But we certainly know that supplements or nutraceuticals are common now in beauty. I assume you're watching the nutraceutical sector. Do you see an opportunity here for Australian botanicals to be used in nutraceutical or beauty supplement formulations?
Absolutely. I think when you look at the Australian botanicals and we get to look at a cellular level and at the not just the the wide plant profile, but the concentrations um, of these particular metabolites as well is really exciting. If you think about it, from a botanical perspective, plants that survive in the harshest environments generally have the most interesting profiles, but usually concentrations as well. That's what we're finding.
Mhm.
And so Australia's megadiversity really represents some of the toughest climates and conditions that a botanical has to survive in. So we're tapping into, what that species gone through its natural selection over millions of years. And when we look at the concentrations, for example, of the vitamin C with the Kakadu plum, when we do a different process to cellular extraction, and we do multiple processes, I probably didn't answer that before, but yeah, depending on the plant part as well, and depending on the solubility of the compounds that we're trying to harness, we will actually use different processes and protocols. From a nutraceutical perspective, we've been doing work for over 5 years now, and we already are able to pull across 16,000 milligrams per 100 grams of vitamin C, natural vitamin C, in a nutrient dense, full entourage essence. And that's so exciting. We've got the industry's looking for, natural ingredients, but we're not wanting to move away from performance, but it also combines this concept of purpose. And I really think that's where natural ingredients really has to be today. It's got to be on performance, but as well as purpose.
Mhm.
And when I say purpose, like what's the impact? What's the positive impact on people and plants, as well as whether it's topical or ingestible. So definitely, as a system, as a human system, we need to look at solutions that are holistic. There's a lot of people in the skincare space that understand this and are starting to do, ingestible solutions. If you look at collagen support, for example, I don't believe it's about taking lots of collagen. It's about looking at the compounds that support our own bodies to make collagen. Things like, vitamin C is a really good example. But as far as the source of phytonutrients in the Australian native botanical space is absolutely astounding. The things that we're finding: high levels of rosmarinic acid, massive polyphenol stores.
Mhm.
Things like, your flavone glycosides and flavonoids, and it's really an untapped market. And for that ingestible space that wants natural solutions, I think Australia really stands to offer the world something really powerful and really unique. So you'll see a lot more next year being released in this space.
Oh, that's exciting. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And Lisa, I have to say thank you too for sharing such a useful overview of plant extracts with us here, and of course for being my guest today on the Cosmo Factory podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening. If you find the Cosmo Factory podcast useful, please take a moment to leave us a 5-star review and share your thoughts so even more cosmetic industry professionals can discover the Cosmo Factory. I'm Deanna Utrusky. Please join me again next Tuesday for a new episode of the Cosmo Factory podcast.